So we have a flux in right here in how machine learning is being looked at. This one, not so useful right now, except for the fact that we have one little island over here called market forecasting. And I'm just going to point out real quick that this topic was machine learning and forecasting, not machine learning and prediction. Prediction's everything under the sun. Prediction's everything. Forecasting, throwing forward. I have a bunch of data, what's going to happen now? Can I base that on what happened before? Forecasting. Prediction is everything, is the much bigger Boolean balloon. Did I just make up a new word? I think I did. I like it. I'm going to use it. Hope nobody can hear me when I talk like this. Did I say that out loud? This is ugly. Just as a by the way, the like support vector machines, neural networks, I really like random forests. However, they're also not forecasting. So we're going to be very brief on this. We have a bunch of data that are ostensibly the same, that are the same. But if you throw the different algorithmic choices at them, patterns of algorithms, if you throw the different ones at them, you get slightly different resulting behaviors, clusters, clustering, dimensional reductions. Here's a reduction, go from this many dimensions to that many dimensions. There's a reduction for you. But again, these are very interesting. I think they're really cool, but maybe I'm sad. But they're not forecasting. Get a little closer into forecasting, and before we look at this, realize that the data here, and maybe I'll make that a little bigger, realize that the data right there are the same, and that what is proposed to be explaining it is very, very different itself. A straight line, a curvilinear line, uh-oh, what's that? A little, maybe a little overfitting. But one of the things I want to point out here is, do we know, and this isn't exactly the purpose of the graph, but it's a point we need to make right now. Do we know what's going to happen to that data outside the bounds that we're currently looking at? If this were not time and we could go back in time, do we know whether it would go down into the negative dimension? We don't know that. Do we know if it's going to go out? Is it going to arch up? Is it going to go down? Is it going to stay straight? We don't know that either. So right now, we have 3 models fitted, and we can argue about the goodness or badness of them right now, but we have to have that substantive knowledge before we can assume that our models are rigorously usable going forward in time and in different situations. We have to have that knowledge, that substantive knowledge. Same thing again, and I'll leave it there. I'll abbreviate. Same thing again. Okay. One of the things that we're always trying to look for in the most basic parts of regression, but also in any other statistical study, is a balance between a bias, having things nicely on target or off a bit. I mean, if that was a rifle and it was a windy day, you'd know how to aim to hit the bullseye. You'd put in your own bias to counter the bias that was there. On the other hand, this guy is nicely centered. He's just spread a little bit. You've got this all the time. Aha! You've got this all the time in. Uh-oh. You've got this all the time in statistical studies where, well, hey, that's handy. where you have, oh, yeah, no, yeah, WAF is good, thank you. I could redraw it. In statistical studies, you have it all the time where you might have there's our nice Gaussian distribution, symmetric on both sides, three standard deviations out. You've got what, 48.5% of your findings on either side. But what if zero, if this was a parameter estimation and zero were right there, would you be a happy camper? You would have, if this were your estimate, if beta hat were your estimate, you'd have an unbiased estimate. But its variance is troublesome because you have a reasonable expectation that your actual parameter, the worth of these data in your model, the worth of these data toward your customer, the worth of these data toward their profits, toward your profits, whomever, you'd have a reasonable estimate that the effect that you're trying to write intelligent things about is what? Zero. That's a bad day. What if somebody said, well, I have and now I don't have a slide to refer to. What if somebody had an estimate that was biased over the true, there's our true beta right there. I'm sorry, I forgot to tell you that. What if somebody had one that was biased, but its amount where the parameter, the actual value would be zero, was very small. The probability of that was very small. You had a biased, but much smaller variance estimate. That would not be a bad thing. So this, and I think I just killed the need for the whiteboard, so we can go back to the slide. How did I do? So you can see that the bias versus variance argument concern is one that impacts every single day. A. B, just to throw it out there, let's realize that these are, that we just had a two-dimensional discussion. And yet here, yes, it's only 2 dimensions, but it also gives us the idea that things can drop as well. And when we're looking at multivariate estimations, you've got all kinds of dimensional impacts that can happen. So again, you've got to drive to say, the more we simplify, the more robust. The more we simplify, the more robust, the more simple, the cheaper to estimate. The cheaper to store, the cheaper to everything, okay? I just broke it again. Making progress. Wow, look at that. Man, we are fast. I'm going to go back there because it's cute, but I'm only going to spend a second on it. So I haven't told you what I've been doing. Long story short, I came to Indiana. I spent a couple of years down at IU. I came up to Indianapolis. I ended up for 17 years working for the Utility Commission, doing a lot of engineering economics, but also a lot of other stuff. Truncating the story, 10, 12 years ago, I started trading mostly my own book in the financial markets, and migrated from one way of trading to another way of trading to another way of trading. But one of the things that, if anybody here actually done any trading in the financial markets? Oh, you lucky people. Well, these green and blue guys here are actually 4 data points. They're called Japanese candlesticks, and they show, if they're green, they show a rise. The wick there, the little line in there, is the actual high, and the top of the candle part is where it closed, and the bottom is where it opened. So you've got 4 data points represented there, kind of nicely, and they're in real common usage. Problem is, there's a way of looking at them that even has an official name called technical analysis, and mostly it's not very technical at all. It's mostly witchcraft. And again, XKCD comes in and kills it. And it's kind of funny because you hear about the wall of worry. Well, here he says, "Hark, the cliffs," and there's CNBC is always quoting about, "Oh, the market's forming a head and shoulders formation," and meaning you have a hump, you have another hump, you have a down hump. Oh, it's going to go down unless it breaks the formation. I'm sorry, you just described. You just explain things after the fact very nicely. Try to predict on that, you're going broke. Okay, so he jumps in here and says, "Look, it's a bathtub formation. We've got an uptalk. We had a declination." There's one. Oh, I love this one. "These 2 points define a line, promising signal." And there are people out there that really think that way. Now, there's a word for this, and Kelvin just gave me the 10 sign. I'm going to really have to race here. One more thing that I see abused all the time is the difference between correlation and causation. Things that happen together. There's actually one of 3 things that can go on. Okay, one is one happened, therefore the other happened. Or you reverse those, maybe Y happened first and X happened because of that. Or they happened to happen together and there was no tie between them at all. To illustrate this, a guy named Anscombe, and now I apologize, I forget when, this is Anscombe's quartet. Long story short, statistically, all of these have the same mean and the same variance. And therefore, if you were going to regress them, they all have the same explanatory line. Would you say those data are different? He asked rhetorically. Oh, wrong little button. I'm a little out of place here. Okay. Well, the big word for the day, and I don't have a slide on this, but what we just saw in the XKCD cartoon is something called pareidolia. Pareidolia, and I on the notes that I'll send out through 6 Foot Up. Pareidolia is our desire to see things in patterns that are accidental. The most common image that we can all think of is the man on the moon. Of course, there is no man on the moon. There is no face. There are no eyes, no mouth, no nothing. He's not smiling all the time. No, just no. There's no bathtub in that graph. There's no necessary reason, because of those trades that came before, why some trades after are going to happen that way. Okay, there's a lot of argument you can put on all around that, but pareidolia also happens in every other place that we are forecasting. We see a line and we want to connect it. We see a pattern and we want to assume that it's going to keep going. Okay, we have in social sciences, if you put up a graph with high crime and police man hours, you will see a stark correlation, okay? Except for the fact that you've got these cases where the crime is low because there's a high police presence, or the crime is high because there's a high police presence. Well, which one are you going to go with? What is your model going to say? You've got to have an underlying idea about it, okay? Another thing is, oh my, can I get there? I won't get there. I won't get there. There's a marvelous, marvelous site. Again, I put a reference to it regarding spurious correlations. And one of the favorites that sticks in my head is suicides in North America versus the number of films that Nicolas Cage has put out. And they're closely tied. They're closely tied. There's ties like kitchen sink replacements and tires sold in Alabama. Okay, and it's you know, and he graphs it out and says, here, you know, here it is. These things are not real. You've got to have that substantive area there. You've got to have an underlying knowledge before you go after the machine learning, before you put into a model, before you forecast it out. Okay, you've got to have an idea: are those relationships real? Are they going to continue? Does your model represent the actual mechanics that are going to happen? They might have happened now. That's great. It might be a bathtub. It might be a Head and Shoulders. Who knows? Is it going to continue? If you don't have that knowledge, you can't just, and one of the things I did skip over here, if you don't have that knowledge, Python itself will do linear regression. Y equals mx plus b. Python will do that just fine. You don't need anything else because it's Python. Or you could get excited and go pack in some pandas. Well, it allows me to do things with arrays. Well, now we can talk about linear algebra. My beta hat is now paren x prime x n paren x prime y. No, inverse. X prime x, inverse, x prime y. There's my beta hat in matrix algebra. Do the same thing with NumPy. You want to bring in scikit? Ooh, classifiers, woo! You can do classifiers that fit. You can do linear programming. No, I'm sorry, linear regression. Well, that's fine. You can go to the SVM tool. You can do SVM, kernel, I'm going the wrong way. You can do SVM, kernel equals linear. Well, you just did the same thing. You can do SVM, kernel equals, oh, I'm sorry, classifier. Classifier equals. You can do this, you can do the same things again and again, getting easier and easier to do with machine learning tools in Python. They're so easy. But back to that Boolean idea, you're going to end up with a situation where you've got numbers and they're not going to hold up. The last point I'll make is one of the best things to do is to get really, really comfortable with your errors. Really, really comfortable with your errors. For example, and errors, we always call them errors, but they're not really errors. They are, in fact, residuals around our estimated line, our fitted plots, okay? Here we have, it says no problem. Why is there, who can tell me why there's no problem right there?
Without reading it, don't read it.
And the reason is, again, back to Gauss-Markov, we have an expectation that our errors are going to be evenly distributed, normally distributed, with a standard, with a mean 0, no error, that's our mean, and standard deviation of sigma squared, or excuse me, a variance of sigma squared. So there's a nice unorganized, we have siphoned all of the organized, all of the systematic behavior out of that data. Here, we haven't. What happened? You've got, I wish I could draw on it, you've got something happening that the farther out we go on our dependent variable, our independent variables are giving us more and more noise, okay? Here, anybody see the shape there? Again, here's pareidolia. Anybody see the shape? What's going on right there? You've got a hump. You can model that quite easily, okay? That's just putting in the same variable again, or the same set of variables, again, with a squared term, okay? That'll take care of it. But is this going to loop around again? Is it a time series where you just captured spring and next spring it's going to do the same thing? The simplest way that all these things, and I won't go back, but that first graphic there, all of the things that what we call machine learning, which is really robotic process automation. All of the things that we call machine learning, especially in Python right now, they all allow us to essentially get closer and closer and closer to the simplest kind of regression, ordinary least squares, OLS. What's the standard on OLS? The Gauss-Markov theorem setup. 4 assumptions, okay? The 3 biggies I want to point out right now are independent, identically distributed movement of variables, IID. They're not sequenced. Wednesday doesn't know about Tuesday, Thursday doesn't care about Wednesday. There's no link there, okay? Also, things don't get weird, things don't change. The variance doesn't change as you go out or come back in time, because that could go in the other direction too. Second one, you have in there, you have the assumption that all the errors are 0. We had that before. The third one is another biggie, and that is that you assume that your data are more than your variables. So if you have 100 variables, you shouldn't have, if you have 100 variables, you shouldn't have 100 data points. Otherwise, you just perfectly specified, you overfitted into the extreme. You overfitted your model. That's the end of the story, okay? You broke it, okay? So you'd always have less variables than the data to support them. So data and variables are not the same thing. That pretty much paints very well from ordinary least squares, generalized least squares, ARIMA, autoregressive integrated moving averages, a lot of what you see in forecasting. Arch, Garch, autoregressive conditional. Oh, we didn't talk about heteroscedasticity, but time is wasting. So the basic idea is all of these fancy models, all of these tremendously powerful algorithms, they can still be reduced down to parsimony, stationarity of data, and knowing your stuff. That's it. With whose quadrant was that with identical regression? I don't understand the question. And I'm sorry, Anscombe's quartet. Anscombe's quartet. For some reason, the last year, I've really seen that come out again. So, let's see. How to determine forecast accuracy. The most sound way to determine forecast accuracy is after the fact. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's in the financial markets, pretty much everything we do is a forecast of some sort. And if you're wrong, you pay. So somebody says, well, I've got the statistic. I really don't care what happened to the net liquidation value of my account. So is it important to have an explanatory narrative behind analytical predictions? I would say absolutely. And I would say that's a huge challenge in what I've seen in machine learning. I've been looking at this only for about 12 to 18 months. And in the past 12 to 18 months, I've just seen again and again and again violations of Gauss-Markov, hence my victimizing you with this rant.
All right, you have any more questions for Tom?
Should I buy Lilly stock?
Yeah.
Buy Microsoft stock?
Yeah. A little too much insider trading there. Oh, we got one more.
What's my take on auto ARIMA, kind of a mixture of ARIMA functions, which spits out PDQ and seasonal PDQs against traditional analysis on, I don't know what ACF, PACF graphs are. Who knows? I can't hear you at all. Can't hear you at all, loud. Oh, okay. ACF, autocorrelation function, PACF, partial autocorrelation functions. They're, of course, very different animals. With ARIMA, you're looking at the path of the dependent variable. And that's almost your entire focus of concern, of attention. With the autocorrelation and partial autocorrelation, I'm not sure what that is, but you'd be looking at a mix of another variable in there, another independent variable, and if you had an idea why they would be important, then that would be something to use that specifically for. But you know, if your purpose is forecast, ARIMA. If your purpose is understanding, I would say the autocorrelation function.
All right, I think that's all we have time for now. Let's give Tom a big round of applause. Thank you very much.